Hello, welcome to the Society for UAP Studies Seminar Series, our ongoing effort to reach out to the general public with the best and latest research on UAP studies. And our guest tonight is Dr. Massimo Teodorani. And I wish to welcome all of you who are tuning in tonight and throughout the night as we learn more about his research. And I wish to say to you that this is the last of our 3 free seminar lectures in this series. We will be continuing this series at least every other week for the foreseeable future until we figure out what's going on with these UAP phenomena, which will probably be a while. So you can tune in and listen and hear from our researchers and experts in the field of UAP studies. If you will continue to listen and learn from our lecturers, you will need to become a member of the Society for UAP Studies, which is not that difficult to do. All you need to do is go to our site, societyforuapstudies.org, click on join and sign up. It's about $6 a month. It is $6 a month or $60 a year. Definitely worth your time and energy because we have a lot more that is coming to you. If you're a member, you will be able to be a big part of our research. You'll be supporting our researchers, supporting our efforts to bring some light to the subject of UAP studies. So tonight we have with us, we're very pleased and honored to have with us a friend of the Society, Dr. Massimo Teodorani, who is a PhD astrophysicist. He is currently at the Bologna University in Bologna, Italy. He has long experience in the study and research of explosive celestial objects, by which we mean supernova, nova, contact high-mass binary stars, flare stars, and eruptive protostars. He has been more recently involved in extrasolar planet research and searching and the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. In parallel, he does research on UAPs from the physics point of view for the last 30 years. His interest in consciousness studies is also part of his research, and he is a fervent science divulger and lecturer. We're very happy to have him here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
There he is. Thank you, Dr. Teodorani. The floor is yours.
Okay, we'll start. So thank you everyone for your patience to listen to this thing. And yes, I am an astrophysicist and who is very interested since a very long time in studying this kind of phenomenon, because I think that the knowledge, a possible understanding of what is going on can help us not only to meet extraterrestrials or something like that. It would be a wonderful happening, okay? But what is important is what can we learn from what we see in the sky, I mean the anomalies in the sky. Can this improve our knowledge about the fundamental physics of what we know, okay? So I have tried in my very little to study the phenomenon. In the beginning, with the SETI project, I've been working a lot with this, especially with an 32 meters antenna at the Medicina Radio Observatory. I've been making plans for the search for ET technosignatures, like Dyson sphere in space. So I made the planning, very detailed planning about that. And then at the same time, I was studying plasma-like phenomena, like the Sdalen lights in Norway. At the present time, my research is this. And I will speak about my present research with some mention to the past one. First of all, I'm interested to understand what is the observable signatures of a possible magnetoplasma propulsion in alleged aerial machines, let's call them so. I will mention something about warp drive physics, because some math has been published somewhere. And I will mention my very last work about a possible, it's a mathematical work which I have submitted to a mainstream journal. Let's see how it goes, about a possible interface between interaction between a higher dimension, fourth dimension, and third dimension, and the role of this model in trying to explain what we are observing in the sky. And then plasma and consciousness. So well, what is underlined in yellow is what I will go in depth. I will try to go in depth today. So let's start with the observational UAP phenomenology. There are works like Kevin Knuth in 2019 that shows this very well in a scientific way published on Entropy journal. And what we see clearly coming from the famous Tic-Tac incident is that we have extreme accelerations. Of course, I will give many more details. Inertia-free turns, impossible zigzag motion, no sonic booms, hovering without lifting, and very high luminosity. This part is of big interest for me because a high luminosity, not always, but sometimes, can allow us to take very specific measurements. And what is most important is that we have to take measurements with sensors, with instruments, scientific instruments that are used also in astrophysics, because only through data we can build up a relevant theory. Otherwise, we will continue to speculate. So there are electromagnetic anomalies, sonar anomalies, and so on. So there are challenges here. How a pilot can survive to such a G-force that is sometimes between 5,000 G, okay? And when a normal pilot can survive up to 9G, okay? How is it happening that we have a drag reduction underwater also? And where is the energy source for luminosity? But above all, what is the energy source for moving these objects in the sky? I will show you how problematic this is for our technology, acoustic, invisibility, and so on. I've been publishing a number of works, and just for your knowledge, and the biggest question today, where I will focus my attention, will be this. UAPs, Unidentified Area Phenomena, or UFOs, if we want to call them, are they pure plasma, or are flying machines that are surrounded by a plasma sheet? In both cases, we expect very high luminosities, especially in the second case. So I will speak about UAPs like Professor Allen Hynek was calling nocturnal lights, namely something that we can treat exactly in the same way in which we treat celestial objects in astrophysics. So astrophysical techniques applied to the study, to the measurements of this kind of phenomena, clearly. But in this case, we don't have exact coordinates, alpha and delta. So we don't know where these objects are. So the best way to make research is to try to position our instruments at areas where the phenomenon occurs more often, like Sdalen in Norway, but also like in Yakima or Brown Mountain, Marfa, in your country, or also the Cape Fear River, for instance. It's very important now. So there are several places where, for some reasons, this phenomenon occur very often. So at this point, we would place measurement station equipped with instruments that I will show you very soon, hoping to get data that we can analyze and then help us to deduce a theory, okay, from what we can measure, okay. The idea that is of great interest for me is so-called magnetoplasma dynamic flying machines. And this is something, namely, it's something that is very bright in the sky. Clearly, this luminosity is not caused by an illumination system because it would be nonsensical, but it's an after effect of a possible propulsion mechanism. We don't know yet, but that's what we want to test using our own instruments. So in online, there are many videos, I would say 90% of which are just CGI, but some should be real, and like those that I have chosen. The second one, the gray one, is very recent. It was taken from a military airplane, and this is what I would like to measure with a technique that I will tell you later. The idea, the physical idea, is that these flying machines use magnetoplasma dynamic propulsion. How is it made of? It's made of by the fact that you have plasma that is obtained from atmospheric material turned into the state of plasma, probably induced by high electrical energy coming from the superconductive fuselage of this aircraft, and the plasma that is confined by an extremely strong magnetic field, namely something that goes from 1 Tesla, namely 1 million Gauss, if you want, from 1 Tesla to possibly 1000 Tesla. So this magnetic field works like a cage that is confining, that is containing plasma and vectoring plasma with specific thrusters in a direction or another. So what happens is just this. You have a very luminous phenomenon. We have a plasma sheet surrounding it, confined by a magnetic field. So this is the idea. Sometimes you can see objects in the sky that are morphologically changed, in the sense that they change shape. And one reason of this could be due to a so-called refraction, magnetic refraction, due to a very strong magnetic field that surrounds the object and helps to propel the object with its plasma that is confined. Here we can obtain, I did several calculations already published on Ukrainian journal, and soon also on the next issue of Limina. So we have a series of simple equations that tell that the acceleration depends on the magnetic field as the square of it by the area of the object and by its mass. Practically, magnetic pressure is confined, is converted into thrust by asymmetrically accelerating and ejecting plasma. But the problem is that this doesn't cancel inertia. So no pilot could survive here neither. Okay, so I would expect that these things are automatic, and I would say they are made up of particular materials that are particularly resistant and also capable to sustain very strong electrical fields that are the source of the magnetic field. Okay, the vehicle can sustain incredible destructive G forces up to 1 million G. So clearly, whoever would be aboard would be not obliterated, would be vaporized. Okay, so we are not able to understand how a pilot could live aboard unless these machines are also able to manipulate space-time, creating a so-called warp bubble where you can have superluminal travel with no inertia, so pilot aboard wouldn't feel any acceleration. In particular, the idea comes from physicist Alcubierre, and the idea is to create a warp bubble that contracts space-time in front of a vehicle and expand it behind. So you can have displacement by manipulating space-time. So it's not really a propulsion, it's a manipulation of space-time with its own equations. And the craft inside the bubble is at rest relative to its local space-time. It experiences no acceleration or inertial forces. In this way, a pilot can easily stay in. And this is a video that that shows what is happening sometimes. It's a real video, it's not CGI, because it was also analyzed by skeptical persons. But the problem here, I mean, the problem for us, Earthlings, is that we need so-called negative energy density that is acquired from the quantum vacuum. Okay, we are able to obtain energy negative, so-called energy, negative energy, which we also call energy, okay, but in very small quantity that can be measured only by the so-called Casimir effect. Here, we need an incredible quantity of energy. I give you an example. If you want to make a mouse pass through a hole of 10 inches for 1 second, you need as much energy as the rest mass of our planet. So it's incredible. How do they obtain this energy? Or is there a trick to obtain that? Is there something else that we don't know? There are good reasons to think that our physics is certainly correct in its fundamental properties, but probably incomplete, not complete. Something is missing. So these phenomena that we see in the air, let them be natural or artificial, maybe coming from other intelligence, are the best stimulation, the best trigger to induce fundamental physics to try to study this kind of phenomenon. And it's scandalous that this has been snubbed in such a way since 70 years, when it should be one of the main subjects of so-called key projects of big physics, as well as astrophysics or particle physics. It's something very big. There is a lot that is studied in physics and astronomy, which is, yes, rigorous mathematically, but we are not certain. So it's not different from UAPs. For instance, we do not have demonstration that dark matter exists. Okay, and we are not sure. We are not sure if the standard model of particle physics is really complete or even correct. Okay, so it's not so that standard physics is totally ascertained and UAP things is bullshit. Absolutely not. It would be worth studying if only enough money would be invested in doing this research, which can be done. because this doesn't depend on the analysis of witness. Okay, witness can be useful very much, and some ufologists are doing very good work. It's just some ufologists, okay, but they are. But we can obtain measurements using instruments. And the best example today is just the Galileo project. It's a multi-wavelength and multi-wave stations that has been placed in several places of your country, and which probably will give us several results in its automatic scanning way. So the idea is that there should be, looking at what is observed, a possibly dual mode of for flying objects, a bimodal propulsion, practically a plasma mode, which give very luminous objects, which are seen sometimes very luminous, but not always. But sometimes they can be very luminous, and a warp mode that allow them to make jumps from a point to another of the sky in a way that no one would understand how is it possible. Okay, so both ways have observational characteristics, and I will concentrate more my attention on the plasma mode. Why? Because it's the one which is more easy to measure if the objects are very luminous. In general, the strategy is that we have to study the phenomenon variability in time, in the same way in which we study celestial objects in astronomy, because that's the only way to understand the physical mechanism that is going on. We have to measure simultaneously using well-calibrated instruments that are multimode, so not only optical instrument, but also infrared, I will show you, radar, etc., that are working in many wavelengths, ranging from infrared up to ultraviolet, probably also X-rays. This can help us to distinguish structured objects from natural or prosaic phenomena, which is very important, because the best way to understand, to start to analyze, is to be able to fix, to understand what is the noise, and namely what is explainable in a prosaic way. So we have to know that. This is the first thing that we have to consider. Okay, and AI can help us a lot. So we have to try to understand how a magnetoplasma dynamic propulsion, specifically, if I consider this mode, works with structured UAPs. And the crucial measurement technique is one: high resolution spectroscopy of Zeeman effect. I will show you very soon what is it, but anyway, there are specific spectral lines that show a particular morphology that I will show you, that can help us to measure the magnetic field directly from spectra. The relevance of this research is clearly important for demonstrating in case, or proving or disproving possible visitation on Earth, but mostly it's important for fundamental physics, to teach us something completely new that could improve our physics knowledge, both at the theoretical and experimental level, and at the engineering possible application. What can we do with what we have learned? This is very important for the evolution of our science, and also for the evolution of our life. I have a plan that since a few years is this, regarding a multi-wavelength observatory plan, which is this. We have a series of sensors, electromagnetic surveillance system with the VLF ELF, radio long band, which is very cheap to use because we start with something very cheap to see if it works. A magnetometer, a radar, could be active or passive, a weather station, and an optical surveillance system that can be a directional camera that we can aim at a specific location, like in the case of Esdalen in Norway, or something more wide, like an all-sky camera. Suppose to put 2 or 3 of these ones 1 kilometer or 10 kilometers away from each other. Well, thanks to triangulation, we can determine target distance, which is absolutely crucial parameter, because knowing the distance, we can know the intrinsic luminosity, for instance. Okay, as electromagnetic radiation in all wavelength goes like the inverse of the square of the intensity. Okay, so it decreases exponentially, so with distance. So we have to know the distance to know the intrinsic properties of the object. Artificial intelligence are able to identify anomalies, and something is already working with the Galileo project observatory, and a system which is a high definition zoom camera or telescope in case, which get the information from the optical all-sky camera, chooses the object to aim, to concentrate the attention, with a pan tilt system that goes to the target in order to obtain high definition as an image. Okay, after we verify that this system is really working mechanically, optically, then we can pass to something more sophisticated in phase 2, where in addition to the camera, pan tilt zoom camera, we have high resolution spectrograph, namely something that is of the order of 10,000 lambda over delta lambda. It's another pan tilt system that aim at the object and track it with a mode that I will show you later, so that we are able to track the object without the object goes out of the aiming. Then later, when everything is working, we can add the forward-looking infrared and additional important facilities like an high-speed camera. High-speed camera is very important because it can help us to take data in 2 ways. If we use a zoom camera, zoom lens attached to it, we can see if there are fast variations in the object, like something like less than 1 second. Okay, and consider these cameras can work up to 1 millionth of second. Okay, ideally we would work on 1/5000th of second. Microwave spectrometer, a particle detector, also very important, sound detector, a laser, a LiDAR, and gravimeter, which will be very important in case if we want to measure a particular kind of object. Now let's see the theories about UAPs and how specific sensors and instruments can help us to understand something about to prove or disprove these theories. We have prosaic objects like well-known drones. We have pure plasma objects. We have machine with magnetoplasma propulsion mechanism that I mentioned before, and flying machine with a warp bubble. Okay, so how specific instruments can help in studying these possible theories to prove or disprove them. All sky camera is useful for all of them. Pan tilt zoom camera, the same, is useful for all of them. FLIR, the same. High speed camera is irrelevant for a prosaic object. We don't need it. Can be useful for pure plasma, can be useful machines for magnetoplasma, extremely important for machine with warp bubble because they create this kind of propulsion, very extremely fast movement that we cannot get with normal camera. But if we obtain, for instance, 1 millionth of second of frame per seconds, then we can see the changement of the speed, and through that we can make some physics from what we directly observe and not only theorize. High resolution spectral is irrelevant for prosaic object, can be useful for pure plasma, but only if that plasma is very luminous. Otherwise you cannot do that. But it's important, fundamental for magnetoplasma, because this kind of alleged machine can be extremely luminous and can so this allows high resolution spectroscopy. We can use the resolution of a spectrograph can be done as much as the object is luminous. But when the object is weakly luminous, we cannot do a resolution spectrograph, but only low resolution spectrograph. Then magnetometer can be useful for all of them. A radar can be useful, not much for the pure plasma hypothesis, but can be very important for a magnetoplasma propelled flying machine, because a plasma sheet that is surrounding this machine can create a sort of stealth effect that is changing all the time according to the orientation of the thruster. Okay, so this explains, and we already have data from radar stations that show intermittent radar tracks that could be due to this kind of object, because we have situations in which we had intermittent radar tracks and at the same time very luminous object in the sky. Can be very important also for the warp bubble hypothesis, and the radio spectrum analyzer can be very important for magnetoplasma because it can create, it's expected according to some calculation, very strong spikes of radiation. Gravimeter is important mostly for a machine with warp bubble because we expect a alteration, a modification of the gravitational field. So gravimeter can help us to understand something. Particle detector is very important with the magnetoplasma. Why? Because if you have a thruster that is coming from plasma that is confined by a magnetic field, you expect that in that thruster, through that channel, you have an acceleration of high energy particles. So if we are able to correlate high resolution data, which I will show detail very soon, with strong emission of high energy particles, this would be a very powerful demonstration that we have a particular kind of propulsion that is based on that. EEG, pure plasma, is very important because it seems that these objects, like ball lightning or something like that, can affect very strongly the brain, and they will show details later. Lasers are also important because we can stimulate with the laser pure plasma objects, and also we can use a laser close to a machine with warp bubble, okay, if it's standing still, clearly, because we have to be able to track it. If there is a bending of the beam, we can then do very important measurements, okay. For now, I will concentrate on the magnetoplasma situation, okay. So we would use, in this case, a spectrograph as main analyzer, okay. But at the same time, in which multi-wavelength and multi-mode automatic station is operating, we would use a shell. A shell is a system of spectra that doesn't give all the spectrum at the same time on a row, but it gives the spectrum split in 6 or 7 parts, one over the other, at the same time. Okay. The spectrograph would be slitless, because if we try to put light inside the slit, if the light is moving very fast, we are not able to track it. So no slit, we will lose resolution of a factor 5 more or less, but we are able to keep the object inside a good field, okay, with a resolution that we can, it's sufficiently high, 10,000, and we would use it only for highly luminous UAPs. Going to look at UFO cases, because in addition to clearly studying the astrophysical techniques, I tried to study scientifically relevant cases of UAPs. And there are cases of UAPs where luminosity has been indirectly deduced to be much more than 1 megawatt, sometimes 5,000 megawatt. So even close to 1 gigawatt, practically an electric plant that is flying. This high luminosity helps us to make high resolution spectrography. Otherwise, we cannot do that, because we would have to use very long exposure time. We should have tracked the object for 2 hours, okay, and the object lasts very little. So only luminous objects. There are calibration systems for the continuum flux and for the spectral lines. There is software that is, very well. There is the data acquisition method with the pan-tilt zoom camera, and the goal is to search for high intensity magnetic fields from 1 Tesla, namely 1 million Gauss, to 100 Tesla, at least, maybe more, via Zeeman effect. What is a Zeeman effect? I will show you right now. In the case, the temperature of the plasma is so high that all the atmospheric gas that has been trapped, has been in a magnetic cage, the temperature is too high, ionization prevails totally on excitation, so that spectral lines do not appear. But when the excitation regime is prevailing, if the temperature is high but not too much, we need that magnetic field is not more than 50 Tesla, according to my calculations. So the plasma temperature will be low enough to see the excitation regime, in the sense that spectral lines are produced when the electrons inside the atom are still inside the atoms. They are not thrown away like in the ionization situation, but the atoms are excited but not ionized. In that case, we can see the lines, and the lines show something like this. From the blue part to the red part, the line, when it is plotted on a graph that shows line intensity versus wavelength, you would see the spectral line that is split in two parts. So this delta lambda z, which is the splitting, will give directly a measurement of a magnetic field B, directly, with no need to know the distance. We already know which lines, spectral lines, which chemical element in our atmosphere would be sensitive, particularly sensitive to this Zeeman effect. So we are already prepared, okay, to work about. We already know what we are going to do here. Well, the only thing that is missing is the crucial money funding and the motivations by who counts in our academic ambience and start. This is just to show that it's feasible high resolution spectroscopy already when the object is 1 megawatt, okay? Because if we want to obtain a signal to noise ratio of 10, which is low but is sufficient to obtain information, especially the spectral lines is very intense, then we need at least a very high luminous object, namely 10 to the 6 watt, namely 1 megawatt, okay? But this can go to 10 to 5 if we consider that we attack the spectrograph to a sensor like CMOS that is attached to the pan-zoom tilt camera. So from 510 kilowatt we can already obtain a good signal to noise ratio with an exposure time or integration time, as we say, of around 20 seconds. This is very important because in only 20 seconds we can obtain very crucial information about, from the physics point of view of this object. Not only, but if the object is more intense than that, and it seems it could be 1,000 times more intense, the exposure time decreases exponentially, and we could obtain a spectrum every fraction of a second, every tenth of a second at least, so that we can obtain many spectral frames, one after the other, hoping that the phenomenon is trackable enough and hoping that it lasts sufficient time for our measuring. Studying the many spectra one after the other, especially when if the object is changing its color, its luminosity, could help us to see how the Zeeman effect is changing in time, and it would be very crucial information from the physics point of view. Because the point here is this: we want to make one. It's not that we want to see all the aliens are there. We want to understand the physics, and we want to do that thing we too. Okay, so this is the idea. It's physics-like research using astronomical methods. Okay, we can be able to distinguish prosaic object or not prosaic. We can see if some of them are magnetoplasma dynamic machine through the discovery of a possible Zeeman effect in spectral lines. And clearly we need to make a very in-depth investigation using scientific key project like in the big science, okay, in macro physics and micro physics. Okay, so we have to trigger to stimulate our colleagues in doing this, but before they believe, we need to show some preliminary data about this, demonstrating that all of this is possible, and it's worth investing a lot of money, and it is indeed. So we have an astrophysical methodology to study UAP using the same instruments towards objects that are luminous, and they are treated exactly like we treat celestial objects. We need to use multi-wavelength and multi-mode sensors, okay, in the same way in which we use in astronomy. And clearly, as I said, a full understanding of the physics of the object demands from us an understanding of the way in which the physical parameters that we are measuring changes both with time and with space, in the sense how is the luminosity spread all over the luminous surface, for instance. This is exactly like when we study the light coming from a galaxy, okay? So the same that we do to understand astrophysical objects. For instance, we would have never understood the nature of Cepheid stars, for instance, which are pulsating supergiant stars, um, if we didn't understand the way in which they change their light and color with time. So we need to observe in time. So only the variation in time can tell us about the physics. We understood the same in the same way the mechanism that animates the quasars, for instance. If we didn't study the outburst of energy from the nuclei of quasars, we would have never understood that in the nuclei of quasars we have mega black holes of 1 million or 1 billion solar masses. So the philosophy to study UAPs must be exactly the same. And this is where the astronomer is so important in this research. And I published about this on Limina, my first article on Limina. Second article is being has been accepted and is being published possibly in 1 month. And so there is a fundamental question for physics that could help us to understand the mechanism of this phenomenon. Is there a correlation between luminosity, up to 30,000 megawatts sometimes, color, radar signature, radio brightness, particle emission, speed up to 12,000 kilometers per hour, acceleration up to 5,000 G, and magnetic field strength from 10 Tesla up to 1,000 Tesla? Well, we could obtain all of them using simultaneously an observing station, okay? Magnetic field deduced from the Zeeman effect. So this is a fundamental question, okay? And we have to consider that the magnetic field that has been statistically deduced by a much smaller phenomenon, less energetic, much less energetic, like ball lightning, is at least a factor 1,000 less than 10 Tesla, okay? So if we have something that is much more in a strength, the question is, what kind of flying machine is able to produce such a high magnetic field strength? The the propulsion mechanism might be deduced from how all the measured physical parameters are changing, including also a possible fast pulsation of the magnetic field. So this is one of the main research interest that I'm following, mostly with calculations, because I cannot do anything else, and not having yet in my hands some of the instruments that are necessary. At the same time, lately, I wanted to try, as I anticipate in the beginning of this presentation, to look at the phenomenon from different sides. Okay, one is propulsion mechanism. Okay, another one is only plasma, which I will show you later. Another one is this. What happens when an object, like a so-called hypersphere, from a 4D object, namely another dimension, crosses our universe? Okay, what if UAPs are not flying machines, but are just intersection point between a higher dimension and a lower dimension? This is not science fiction. There is a lot of mathematical studies about this. And there is predictions through the calculations that are more based on mathematics and geometry and then physics that predict that a possible hypersphere that is entering from higher dimension into our one would be characterized by a very specific light curve which is absolutely symmetric from the entrance point to the exit point. Not only that, but if the object is more complex than a hypersphere, if the object is so-called hypercube or a tesseract like we call, that is rotating in addition to moving from hyperspace to our space or our brain uh, from superstring theory, we would have a shape shift. Okay, but there are several predictions of this model which I submitted today to a new journal of physics that seem to fit to what we observe in UFO cases. Okay, there are several UAP features. One is a sudden appearance disappearance. Then the object enters our space from a dimension we cannot see. There is a shape morphing. A rotating tesseract looks different every instant it crosses our space. There is no sign of propulsion, as exactly as we see, like in the Tic Tac incident. We 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 don't see. We expect that, according to calculation, we would have a constant speed from the a higher dimension to ours. But when the object is coming to our dimension, we would perceive it like a huge acceleration, but that would be only a geometric illusion. In reality, the law of physics would be totally respected, only with the extension to a higher dimension, which I repeat is not science fiction, but is something that has been studied by mathematical physicists. Then we predict size. There is a correlation between the size of the object, let it be an hypersphere or a tesseract, and the duration of the phenomenon, namely how long this light curve is lasting. So let's see what happens. I just sent this article. There is a 10% of probability that it will be desk rejected. Only why? Because they will see the word UAP. Let's see if they select it only because there is UAP word, and let's hope that they go to read the paper, which by the way is full of mathematics, and it's 85 pages. Okay, but I tried, otherwise I will publish in a different way. So this is my last interest of research, and I think that we have to consider we don't know what we are dealing with. Okay, so we have to try, if we have energy enough, to face the phenomenon from different directions. Okay, and now let's speak about pure plasma. So plasma that is pure, it's not a sheet around a flying saucer, for instance, but just pure plasma. Why is it important? Well, here we enter into quite exotic situations. Plasma compared to solid objects have can show different spectral signature. I don't go in depth here because I want to speak more about other things. In plasma and structure objects like the one that I spoke about before have a different thermal signature, a different situation. It would be very unstable. It would have erratic motion. Um, while solid object in general could have a coherent ballistic motion. But above all, the magnetic signature, a natural plasma would be much less intense in terms of magnetic strength than a solid object that is propelled by magnetoplasma. The pure plasma balls, this is the last part of my presentation, which was how to distinguish structured object with a plasma sheet, plasma magnetic sheet, and a pure plasma ball. Plasma is ionized state of matter. It constitutes 99% of the visible universe. Plasma phenomena like ball lightning occur inside our atmosphere in several forms, and it is triggered by natural phenomena such as lightning or piezoelectricity from the rocks. Sometimes plasma show coherence. Under the right conditions, they exhibit characteristic of collective behaviors of the particles that compose them. So self-organization, coherence, like if it were only one object, okay? And the most interesting thing is so-called plasma crystals. There is a paper dating from 2007 by Tsitovich et al., published on the New Journal of Physics, that shows that if you immerse dust particles inside the plasma, they acquire electric charges. They form a particular structure that can self-replicate, store information, evolve, displaying behaviors that are practically identical to the DNA, letting us think that these objects are a new form of life, which is called weird life. People were speaking a lot about this about 19 years ago. So then some hypothesis, this is speculation, comes. What happens? Because if the theory by Penrose and Ameroff about the consciousness, quantum consciousness, is true, what happens if the particles of the plasma behaves exactly like the microtubules inside the brain, which are supposed to be in a state of quantum coherence, behaving like only one entity described by only one wave function? Could it be that these plasma things where the life can be conscious? There are field observations in SDAL and very much, probably also in other regions of Earth, with that show a coordinated behavior, apparent responsiveness to external stimuli, such as a laser beam, and witnessed interactions with human observers. Before speaking about plasma, I have to tell you, I've been reading everything about possible natural causes. I don't discuss them because it would be boring, but as you can see, there are many theories about the formation, natural formation of plasma. And the formation of this plasma is probably natural, but that they then can, in particular condition, this natural formation could become alive in some way. We have to test this. Anyway, similar phenomena have been seen in Stalin. In Stalin, we have seen plasma-like phenomena, so no structure, okay, but sometimes also structure phenomena. And we don't know what is the relation between structured phenomena, like a flying saucer, so triangles. I saw one once during my 5 missions, and this plasma light, incorporeal plasma light. So this is very well known. Erling Strand has done a wonderful work, pioneering work since 1984. Anomalous light phenomena like flashes in the sky, light orbs of several colors, even other shapes that I documented, something that turn into rectangle shapes, daylight objects sometimes, oscillating magnetic and radio signal, which is very interesting, intermittent radar recordings sometimes, which is very, very much expected by a magnetoplasma machine, okay? Because in Stalin, something like that has been seen mixed up with a more apparently plasma phenomenon. So, which one is the connection between apparently natural phenomena and structure phenomena? It seems they are seen together there, okay? There is a reaction to laser, okay? Since 1999, the valley is being monitored by 2 observatories, Blue Box and White Box. I've been there, I've collaborated with them for quite a long time, and recent measurements have demonstrated that there is an oval area of a few kilometers in Stalin that is extremely highly electrified. Okay, so is someone very interested to the geophysical conformation of the territory, so that they go there like to make gasoline, or I don't know, it's funny, but of course there have been a lot of work that has been published by myself and my colleagues with that was able to tell us something about the power that we were able to measure only once when we knew the distance, shape changes, translucency. This is all my work. A light curve, the way in which its light is blinking, there pulsates, okay. The spectrum, which is quite strange because it behaves like a spectrum of LED light, strangely. And now basic reflections. Before I will hypnotize you with the last video that was taken in Stalin by Project Stalin, which is now led by Fred Pallesen, with a fundamental advisory by Professor Erling Strand. This is a video that was studied strongly by Rainer Heisel from Germany, an engineer, and also enhanced by a computer scientist, another German, whose name is Henning Kirsten. The point is here, the role of witness. And here, it's very important because this is the study of ufologists who know psychology, and sometimes also parapsychologists. So does the UAP phenomenon occur when there is no witness? Because we think that, okay, we place an automatic station and we take measurements. And so we can go to sleep, and when we wake up, we will see what happened. Does this some of these phenomena happen only when there is a witness, because they are interested to interact with the witness. What is that? Are we driven by an ATH, extraterrestrial hypothesis illusion? Is this hypothesis affecting experiments of our project, or UAP, are something more exotic and earthly at the same time? It's like in this sketch, which shows the guy that say, "Oh, it's raining." No, it's not raining. It's something, it's happening, something like that. So what is reality? It depends on how you look reality. If you are able to look at reality from like a bird flight, maybe you can catch something of reality. But if you look at very narrow sight, probably you catch something of reality, but not reality. It's like the parable of the cave from Plato in philosophy. So what is reality? Are we able to catch reality? I was speaking, mentioning about my last mathematical research about the intersection, hypothetical intersection between a 4D object in our 3D world, possibly explain much of UFO phenomena. Maybe they, on the 4D, they know what is the integral reality, and we are like in the flatland theory, like a bug that is walking on a sheet of paper, while someone on a sphere, just shifting it of a dimension, is looking at us. How UAP and possible intelligence therein might generate quantum effects? So the light phenomenon could be a plasma life capable of some form of consciousness that is coming from effects of the quantum of a quantum coherent plasma. There are some plasmas that in particular situations behave in a coherent, quantum coherent way, namely all the particles inside are entangled at that point. They are called plasmons. There are several works that have been published about that. The light phenomenon is able to communicate with a human witness due to the entanglement mechanism, quantum entanglement mechanism, or it can be able to insert coded messages in the human brain wave via a quantum effect that triggers a classical state in the brain. I will show you something about this. Anyway, can a plasma become a life form? Well, this is a sketch that was taken from an article by Tsitovich et al., which shows a comparison between the DNA shape modeling and the modeling of plasma when it interacts with dust particles. It's identical. And so I recommend this Tsitovich et al. Paper on New Journal of Physics, which is a prestigious journal from Europe. So if it were so, if a plasma would be a life form, then the universe would be full of life, because you could put these kind of things everywhere. Life could exist in also in the space, or also on Venus, in the sun, wherever. Is able this life to become not only alive but also intelligent? Well, in the past, it's interesting and funny that their culture was telling that these are dead beings, ghosts, substantially. It's funny to study from a cultural point of view. Anyway, I will not concentrate my attention to it, but I'm very interested what the ancient are telling about this kind of recurrent lights. So the theory, practically in the brain, as I said, according to Roger Penrose and Stuart Ameroff, consciousness in the brain is born from the existence of microtubules, something like 1 billion microtubules that compose the tubulins, which are proteins that in their turn compose the neurons, okay? These are all together in a state of entanglement in a form of quantum coherent form, and they are controlled by a wave function from quantum mechanics, which collapses continuously. At every collapse of the wave function, we have a consciousness moment, and the energy associated to the number of microtubules that are active to it is as much as high as the time is low. So you can have millions of consciousness moments every day for a human, or you can have a few, 3 or 4 consciousness moments for an amoeba. Okay. What if the same mechanism, this is my hypothesis, happens inside the particles of a plasma, like an Sdalen plasma light? What if this same mechanism occurs so that these lights become conscious? It seems science fiction, it seems even more fantasy than science fiction. But I listened to a lot of people who wanted to speak with me, but didn't want to make their name because they don't want to be ridiculed, okay? Communication events, flashlights, current lights, laser beams aimed at light bulbs trigger a luminous answer from them, especially from the experiments of Erling Strand in 1984. He aimed a laser beam to one of those blinking lights, and the pulsation period changed 8 times out of 9. Many persons hear voices in their head, they told me. Some scientists reported episodes of so-called synchronicity between their actions or decisions and the behavior of light bulbs in the sky. In particular, Professor Rutledge, solid-state physicist, when he was investigating anomalous lights occurring in Piedmont in Missouri in the late 70s practically. We cannot disregard this only because, oh, it's not scientific. Okay, let's see if it's true or not. Is it possible to see, to make a verification? Do UAP phenomena affect brain activity? We cannot measure. We can measure this. Okay. So in 2007, strange synchronicity, I was with a colleague in Austria at the so-called Quantum Mind Conference, where Professor Hameroff was there. And we presented proposal to test a possible synchronicity between light phenomena and the human brain. How can we measure this? Well, we can measure this. We only have to want to do that, okay? And not to say, oh, we don't do these things. This is cuckoo. This is something like that. No, 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 no. Science is by its nature a curious cat, okay? And so we can make a measurement. We can take the test person, which is induced in a state of a deep meditative state. The test person is monitored using an EEG analyzer. At the same time, we measure the external EM field using a spectrum analyzer. So we want to measure the ambient radiation. And if a light phenomenon is seen, we measure the light phenomenon itself. But above all, we stimulate the laser phenomenon using a laser. aiming against it a laser beam to see its reactions. At the same time, we want to see what happens in the brain of the person who is monitored with EEG. Conversely, we could use so-called gold helmet coming from Michael Persinger experiment, inducing pulsed magnetic field in the brain to see if something happens in the light. Does it change color, luminosity, magnetic field? We can measure everything at the same time. We can do this, of course, only if we want to do this. The exact timings of all events are accurately measured. And the question is, are the plasma of the light phenomena and the neural cells of the brain linked by entanglement of some kind? Could be not. Could be that the brain is affected by, how to say, very low frequency fields that induce hallucinatory state. We can measure also that. That would be the noise. In any case, we are wondering if something is in the brain, and we can measure the brain, not only the brain wave, but also what happens inside the noise. If we normalize the brain wave, okay, to 1, and then we focus the attention into the noise to see if there is something, using a possible algorithm like a Fourier transform or Caron-Love transform that we use normally with SETI. Is it possible that something is deposited inside the brain at that very moment? Okay, because we are not satisfied only of the fact that we could demonstrate there is an entanglement, but we want to see if through this connection some information is transmitted, and we can measure this. So what could be the nature of intelligent plasma balls? Cosmic or terrestrial conscious life forms coming from natural phenomena, or technological probes, drones of extraterrestrial nature? Well, there is a famous video from Dahlen that shows, strangely, a structured object and a plasma object together. I can show you better. At some point before the first half of the video, you will see a little light ball that is literally soaked inside this structured object, luminous structure, triangular object, something that is entering inside. So this is a very crucial video, 1999, by the way. It's Dahlen Blue Box, thanks to Erling Strand. So, are some UAP manifestation of non-human intelligence? We have a very varied show, clearly. Apparently, this phenomenon defy the laws of physics. And apparently, this presentation was about luminous UAPs at night and the way in which astronomy-like methods can help us to understand and to study them rigorously. I concentrated my attention on 2 possibilities, on pure plasma, the latest, and plasma sheet surrounding a solid hull, the so-called plasma dynamic system. And weird life, okay, with the plasma ball. Okay, I think that I finished. Thank you for your attention.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Teodorani.
Thank you.
It's great to have someone who can explain very difficult, complex scientific topics in ways that intelligent people can understand. We have several questions for you, if you're willing to take them.
Yes.
And quite obviously, the Hesselen lights is very fascinating to people. And so the first two questions are directly related to that set of phenomena. The first one is, what sort of interactions with human beings have there been recorded at the Hesselen sites? But obviously between the lights or whatever the phenomena are and people.
Well, there is nothing so far, nothing that has been scientifically recorded. Okay, for now we only have witness situations. Okay, of people that spoke privately. Okay, but not only from Esdalen, but also in other places of the world. There is also in Cape Fear River, in North Carolina, in your country, of a person, Chris Bledsoe, I think his name, that said exactly the same thing. But there is not a recorded, um, at the best of my knowledge, uh, situation between these things.
Do you find that in general, just to follow up on that, a lot of people do want to talk about the idea of a close encounter of the fourth or fifth kind, where there's this interaction between an observer, a witness, and UAP phenomena. Do you find that there is much of that at all anywhere in observations of these phenomena?
Well, there is something regarding my experience. Well, we were in the field in Stalin in the summer 2000. I was with a colleague and his wife, and we were at a specific point in Stalin, and we were approached by a small light that was looking like a giant firefly, which was about, I would say, 3 feet long. Okay, it approached us literally, and it stationed at about um, 300 feet away from us at the human height, over and close to a fir tree. It stayed there for 10 minutes. So it seemed there was an interaction. Another time, but with no result. This is very frustrating, okay, because my colleague was afraid it was better to go away. I tried to approach it because I wanted to take a photo close to that, which I took, but I was too far anyway. The other time, there was a triangular object. In that case, it was not plasma-like at all. It had three uh, lights in the vertex, and it passed exactly above us, and it was seen by 5 persons in 2 different locations. Unfortunately, we didn't expect and we couldn't triangulate. Okay, it was a triangular object because it was possible to, there was a residual light, because it's a Nordic country and latitude 65 or something. So there is a residual light in summer. And I could distinguish very well a surface, triangular, against the sky. It was exactly above us. It stopped above us. Difficult to say how high it was, but I think not more than 300 meters, not more. And it stopped there. It started to rotate over us, exactly over us, and it turned off, disappeared. We didn't see it going away. We saw it coming over us, but we didn't see going away. I tried, I had the red laser, I aimed to the lawn, trying to invite to land, but it didn't work. So there have been attempts of interaction, but they were absolutely very frustrating. Um, I know that there are scientists, one engineer in the United States, he wrote me more than 20 years ago. He was using music because you mentioned the movie. He was using a synthesizer, portable synthesizer, And he said that he obtained result, but I don't know which result he obtained exactly. So far, we we have nothing in our hands, and nothing in scientific terms. We don't.
Thank you. Also related to the Hasleden lights, someone asks, have there been any experiments in the lab to try to replicate the phenomena that's seen at Hasleden? Hasleden.
Yes, yes, since long ago, not by us, but some physicists, especially in Russia. I would mention Manikin and also at the Kurchatov Institute in Moscow, and also others replicated the phenomenon using forced air and at the same time injecting microwaves. Uh, they create very little ball of light that are 1 inch and have a duration of 1 second, 2 seconds. But something that is much smaller than a ball lightning, which would last 30 seconds or something, and much less durable than Stalin lights that can last, even if turning on and off, up to 2 hours. Okay, so lights of the luminosity of Stalin have never been replicated, but in a microscopic and micro form, yes, they've been replicated in a laboratory several times. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Going back earlier to in your presentation, there was a lot of material there, but I think one theme that you touched on a number of times was mentioning that we are probably dealing with phenomena that our current understanding of physics cannot explain. So my question is, how can we overcome our lack of understanding to be able to even detect types of data that we don't know? We don't even know what we're measuring, right? How can we overcome that hurdle?
Yeah, well, the best thing to do is to take good measurements, first of all. So, high resolution, I am very fond of high resolution spectroscopy because in the beginning, I don't want to think about exotic physics. In fact, warp drive physics I left a bit apart because it's not easy to prove it. Maybe a little if we have a gravimeter, if we have a laser to see if there is a bending of the laser beam. But in the case of a plasma that is very luminous, we know why we have a luminous plasma, stable. We need to have a very strong magnetic field. And when it's luminous, it's very hot, we can obtain spectra. And if it's very luminous, we can obtain very high quality spectra. If we are able to measure the magnetic field, that would be a great result, which would show that that is standard physics. It's a physics that we cannot engineer yet, but it's a well-known physics, okay? This doesn't explain the very quick movements in the sky. I am not for now studying that part. I prefer to study what our physics can understand, okay? But there is a part of the physics of this phenomenon that we can understand, that it obeys electromagnetic physics independently from kinematic characteristics, and we concentrate our attention on what we are able to do. Let's see what our physics can explain. Plasma physics, well, yes, we know how it works. We already know how it works. And we are also able to engineer something for something like for 30 seconds, some minutes, when in tokamaks, for instance, when we try to confine a plasma with a very strong magnetic field, which is typically 50 Tesla, for nuclear fusion. So we already know how to do that, but not how to fly with that. We don't know yet. Let's start with the physics that we know, and then later we will try to understand the other physics. Clearly, an object that is moving very fast, jumping from a point to another of the sky, it's impossible to track it. So we cannot see, at least with the instrumentation that we have. But it's possible to anyway make measurement, calculate the speed, and to see if there is a correlation between the changement of the color from a point to another during the acceleration. We can aim a laser. We know the physics of warp drive theoretically, but we don't know at all the engineering. But we can do something, yes.
Perfectly reasonable. Yes. We have another question that's just come in. Someone asks, what results would you like to achieve via communication with plasmas? I don't suspect as a true scientist you have this particular result that you're looking for, but perhaps a better question is, what type of responses or interactions could there be?
Yes. Well, the first thing to demonstrate is to see if there is an entanglement mechanism between the plasma light and the brain. The other one, I mentioned a work by an American physicist, Fred Tilde, Dr. Fred Tilde, with whom I was in touch. And he's very old now, 90 years old. I don't know if he's still alive, but his idea was that at a certain level, there is a sort of hidden quantum entanglement mechanism all over the universe since the beginning of the universe with the Big Bang, because once everything was connected, then he thinks that something has been maintained after the inflation of the universe, and it could be used to transmit the communication. Okay, quantum communication you cannot measure, because if you measure the fact that there is a connection, but you cannot transfer information, because at the moment in which you try to measure it, you make the wave function of quantum mechanics collapse, and so we obtain nothing. But if someone is able to turn a quantum trigger into a classical physical state, then we can measure. So let's go back to the plasma object. If they are whatever they are, they could be also plasma drones or something, transmit information in the brain. We could go to see inside the brain, but not only the brain wave. That's another test that we do before. But inside the noise of the brain wave, it's expected by Fred Tilde that there is some signals that are coded inside the noise of the brain wave that could be extracted using a very specific algorithm, which is exactly the same that we use for SETI. So what I'm expecting to measure very deep inside the brain noise. Once that brain wave has been normalized with a mathematical function or with a spline function, then go to see using this algorithm and go to see if something is transmitted and see.
That's fascinating. There's so much
Yeah.
there. You described so many ways of measurement, so many possibilities for what could be measured, how we can measure it. How could citizen scientists, probably some in our audience right now, contribute to this as the larger project of this endeavor? How could the interested public get involved? Is it in using instruments of any kind? Is it donating computer power like the old SETI project back a couple decades ago? I think that's still going on. But how could other people get involved who are interested in helping out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I tried in the past, 20 years ago, I created an initiative that lasted not much, but produced just very little, which was called SpecNet, training people everywhere in some parts of the world, like United States, Australia, Canada, Ireland, um, Germany, to use spectral gratings, okay? By simply putting a grating in front of the lens of the camera, and if they see some UAPs telling them how to obtain a spectrum, practically you have simply to photograph the spectrum of the light and to learn how to increase resolution by changing focal length of the camera. So I was trying to instruct people, which it happened that some of them sent me spectra of some kind. And it was partially useful. And thanks to an American chemical physicist whose name, what was his name? I don't remember, but okay, it's not important the name, but he had a great idea to use a phone like this and to apply how to say a film that allows to obtain spectra in very low resolution spectra. It's simply something that you can obtain by cutting um, along the edge a CD-ROM disk. If you cut that your film, you can obtain a grating to attach to the camera here that can give you a spectrum of what you are seeing in the air, which sometimes could be useful. It's very low resolution spectrum, but sometimes powerful spectral lines could come out and could be measured. It would be just a result. And yes, your idea is fantastic. If we can create the UAP equivalent of SETI Home, we would obtain incredibly great results. Also, there is an app in the phone which is called magnetometer that you can apply to this one, to the phone,
Mhm.
and helping to measure the changement of the local magnetic field while a UFO phenomenon is in sight. And also, they could move by car or by foot and see how the magnetic field received here changes with the distance. Clearly, it changes because the magnetic field changes with the inverse of the cube of the distance. So there is a lot of things that citizens can do, photographs, videos, and an advice to citizens. Don't zoom, but leave the video as it is, okay? Because it's important that what is seen is compared to a reference point, like a hill, a house, or whatever. But they tend to zoom immediately. It's wrong. It's of no utility. And especially if you zoom, sometimes you see the image of the of the diaphragm of the camera, that people pass for a triangle, a flying saucer. It's not a flying saucer. It's just the image of the diaphragm. For instance, there is a video that was diffused by Corbell, I think, with a night vision system by Navy, which shows a triangular object. That triangle is not triangle, but it's the image of the diaphragm of the camera. So we have to be careful, very careful, to the instrumental noise, let's call it so.
That's very good advice. Everyone's first instinct is to zoom in to get a better look. I'll get a better look, and yeah, that can be very counterproductive. Very
Absolutely.
much so. But it's exciting, the possibility that we could bring more researchers together, help people who want to assist in resolving this mysteries of all these phenomena, from the Hasselden lights to the things you see in the sky, plasma objects especially, fascinating thing that we know so little about. So okay, sorry about that. I see no further questions. I don't have any more. I'm a philosopher, not a physicist or an engineer, so a lot of this is a bit outside of my purview. But I learned a lot tonight, and I really appreciate it. Your graphics were wonderful and very helpful. We appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us here with the Society. And we hope to have you on soon again.
Thank you very much for having me. And see you again. I'm a big supporter of SUAPS. So I'm with you.
Yes. So thank you very much. If you could stay with us connected here for a bit, and Raphael, you can run our closing credits. Again, if you want to participate in future seminars and see them, become a member of the Society for UAP Studies. We definitely need your support. We definitely want you to be a part of what we're trying to accomplish here, to solve the mysteries of the UAP phenomena.
Okay. I will be very happy with that.
Excellent.